She only went to the WI supper to survive another evening of gossip, but by dawn a critic was dead, Bill Wong was framed, and Castley was sharpening its rumours. This is Agatha Raisin, and the murder Bill Wong was framed for. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Your comments make this cozy corner feel even warmer, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next mystery. A clear, crisp Castley evening had the sort of smug charm Agatha Raisin always distrusted. The sky above the Honeystone cottages glowed faintly pink, as though the village had taken the trouble to dress up for the occasion. Unfortunately, Agatha had been summoned to the Women's Institute Regional Home Cooking Supper, an event she would have avoided if she had possessed an ounce more sense or slightly less pride. But Mrs. Boggle had cornered her in the post office, and Agatha, caught off guard between stamps and gossip, had agreed with the sort of enthusiasm one shows a dentist wielding a drill. The hall was already warm with bodies and competitive zeal when she entered. Rows of trestle tables bowed under the weight of quiches, mysterious casseroles, and prudish trifles arranged like soldiers at inspection. The air smelled of pastry, boiled vegetables, and the unmistakable undertone of resentment that accompanied every WI competition within a 10-mile radius. Agatha had brought a potato salad purchased from Tesco and transferred into her own bowl. It was, she thought, a harmless deception. Sadly, the idea of harmlessness evaporated the moment Mrs. Boggle swooped upon her like a church warden discovering a lit cigarette in the pews. "Shop-bought, isn't it?" Mrs. Boggle announced in a voice that carried across the hall with malicious grace. She poked the bowl as if searching for a price label. "We can always taste a factory dressing, dear." A ripple travelled through the gathering. Doris Simpson looked mortified on Agatha's behalf. Mrs. Bloxby, gentle as ever, offered an encouraging smile. Agatha gave a tight grin and muttered, "Lovely to see you too." It was exactly the sort of public embarrassment Castley adored. She wished she had stayed home with Hodge, who never questioned her culinary ethics. Finding a seat near the heaters, she surveyed the room. Bill Wong's mother fluttered about the tables with maternal enthusiasm, while Bill himself slipped in late, coat askew and eyes tired. When he spotted Agatha, he mouthed a weary hello. He looked strained, the way he always did when the village attempted to mother him beyond the bounds of human tolerance. The evening's peace, such as it was, shattered when Martin Ledden arrived. The Mercester food critic made an entrance like a man expecting applause, a thin, smirking figure with a scarf arranged as though styled by a theatrical wind machine. The villagers stiffened. Everyone had heard of him. His reviews were sharper than broken glass, and he wore his cruelty with the casual comfort of a favourite jumper. He prowled from dish to dish, offering commentary with the relish of someone disemboweling a rival. "Overcooked," he murmured at Felicity Trammell's quiche. "Under-seasoned," he declared at Mrs. Boggle's casserole, which delighted Agatha. Then he reached Doris Simpson's trifle, tasted it, and pulled a face of almost spiritual disappointment. "The WI seems determined to prove mediocrity as an art form," he announced. Agatha's pulse ticked upward. "Must be exhausting," she said sweetly, carrying around all that ego. "You'll strain something." Ledden turned, surveyed her bowl, and smiled with the chilly pleasure of a cat discovering a trapped mouse. "Tesco potato salad, charming." His voice carried, and half the hall turned in amusement. Agatha nearly choked on her own fury. She imagined throttling him with his own scarf. Bill approached, trying to inject calm into the situation, but Ledden turned his attention to him too. "Sergeant Wong, your mother tells me you have no appreciation for subtle flavours. Perhaps that's why your village's food troubles suit you." Bill winced. Agatha felt a spark of something protective, much to her irritation. Before she could retaliate further, Ledden wandered to the kitchen with the cold assurance of someone expecting victims to follow. Agatha busied herself with tea, but paused when she heard raised voices drifting from behind the half-closed door. A low threat, sharp and uncompromising. "If this gets out, your career dies first." Ledden's voice. She edged closer, pretending to inspect a stack of paper plates. The other voice was hushed, urgent, but she couldn't place it. Chairs scraped, footsteps shifted, then the lights flickered in the hall, Castley's electrics protesting the seasonal strain, and conversation spilled into a raffle announcement. By the time Agatha pushed through the crowd toward the kitchen, the quarrel had dissolved into steam from the industrial kettle. Ledden emerged moments later, expression smooth, scarf immaculate. He took a glass of wine from a startled villager and toasted the room with smug enjoyment. Agatha returned to her seat, unease prickling her. The hall had settled into its usual rhythm, clinking cutlery, muttered judgments, and the inevitable chorus of competitive sighs. Mrs. Bloxby sat beside her and offered a plate of ginger biscuits. "Best avoid further battles tonight, dear," she whispered kindly. Agatha accepted the biscuit and tried to relax, but her eyes kept drifting to Leaden. He was whispering something to Felicity Trammell now, prompting her to clutch her handbag as if it contained state secrets. Agatha's curiosity sharpened. The raffle commenced with the usual blend of desperation and disappointment. Agatha won a jar of homemade chutney she didn't want. Doris Simpson won a set of scented candles she pretended to adore. Charles Fraith, who had drifted in purely for the entertainment, won a decorative mug and immediately attempted to trade it for a glass of red. Through all of it, Bill seemed increasingly distracted. His mother hovered anxiously. When a constable from Mercester entered the hall, scanning the crowd, Bill straightened. The constable approached, spoke briefly to him, and handed him the hall's telephone. Bill's expression drained of colour. Agatha noticed at once. He stepped outside into the chilly evening, shoulders stiff. When he returned, he didn't speak to anyone. He simply collected his coat, murmured something to his mother, and headed for the exit. Agatha intercepted him at the door. "What's happened? You look ghastly." "It's work," Bill said quietly. "Sorry, I've got to go." He attempted a reassuring smile, but it faltered. She watched him hurry away across the village green, the wind tugging at his coat. A sense of unease unfurled in her stomach. Bill was steady as they came. Seeing him so shaken was unsettling. Behind her, the WI raffle droned on. Someone cheered, and Doris Simpson sang out a triumphant cry over a tin of shortbread. Agatha felt none of the evening's forced cheer. Instead, she stepped outside for a breath of cold air, the cottages glowing gently under the moon. Somewhere a fox barked its lonely call. "Just what this village needs," she muttered, hugging her arms against the chill, a mystery with indigestion. She had no idea how right she was, for when Carsley woke the next morning, it would wake to a murder. Agatha woke to a frost-blue morning and a ringing phone, which was never a good omen. The cottage was cold in that particular Cotswold way, pretty from the outside, treacherous within. Hodge was curled on the foot of her bed, his tail flicking in mild irritation at the disturbance. Agatha reached for the receiver with the weary instinct of a woman bracing for disaster. "Agatha!" Bill Wong's voice was tight. Too tight. "Sorry to call so early." She sat up, already alert. "Bill, what's happened? Are you all right?" A pause, then, "It's Martin Leaden. He's been found dead." Agatha blinked. That pompous scarecrow? Dead? She felt a flicker of shock, followed immediately by something more complicated. Dread. Bill's tone confirmed it. This wasn't just gossip. This was police work pulling its claws into someone she cared about. "Where?" she asked. "His flat in Mercester. They want me there immediately." Another pause. "Can you come?" The request was so un-Bill-like that Agatha's stomach sank. "Give me 10 minutes." She dressed with brisk determination, fussing only twice with her hair before surrendering to the cold. The morning air bit at her cheeks as she hurried to her car. Frost glittered across the roofs of Carsley, making the village look deceptively tranquil, as though nothing unpleasant ever stirred between its hedgerows. A fox trotted across the green, pausing to glare at her with superior indifference, a look she often suspected villagers adopted in council meetings. She drove to Mercester with a sinking feeling that deepened as she reached Leaden Street. Police cars lined the curb. A constable guarded the entrance with exaggerated importance, the sort that came from having little else to guard. He stepped in front of her. "Restricted scene, madam." Agatha flashed him a smile that had melted sturdier men. "Sergeant Wong asked me to come. You can stand there or you can let me in, but if you choose the former, I'll stand here all day telling every passer-by how you prevented vital investigative support." The constable hesitated, then moved aside. Agatha swept past with satisfaction. She found Bill standing outside the flat, arms folded tightly, face grey with apprehension. "You all right?" she asked, softer now. "Not really." He looked at her with the depleted dignity of a man who had slept badly and awakened to scandal. "Come inside." The flat was a mess of police movement, quiet footsteps, murmured instructions, and the faint scrape of gloves on surfaces. Ledden sat slumped at his dining table, head bowed, as though inspecting a disappointing meal from the afterlife. A single stab wound darkened his shirt front. The wine on the table gleamed in the cold light like a theatrical prop. Inspector Wilks hovered nearby, filling the room with the smug air of someone who considered himself the rightful centre of every case. He spotted Agatha and frowned. "Mrs. Raisin, I don't recall inviting civilians." "Good thing I didn't wait for you then," Agatha replied sweetly. "I'm here for Bill." Wilks eyed her, then turned back to Bill with something like triumph. "As I was saying, Sergeant, the neighbours confirm Ledden had a visitor late last night, and you were the last person seen speaking with him at the WI event." "That wasn't a conversation," Bill said sharply. "He insulted my mother's dumplings." Wilks raised a brow. "Motive enough for some." Agatha bristled. If that were true, half the village would be serving time. She turned her attention to the room instead. 2 plates were set on the table, cutlery placed neatly as if for a dinner invitation. Only 1 plate had been touched. The other sat untouched beside a filled wine glass, condensation forming around its base. Someone had been expected. Someone who either fled or never arrived. A torn notebook lay on the counter. Several pages had been ripped out, leaving jagged edges behind. Near it, an expensive-looking camera sat switched off, lens cap discarded nearby. Agatha resisted the urge to pick it up. She crossed to Bill, keeping her voice low. "This doesn't look good for you." "I know." His voice was quiet, threaded with shame. "Wilks already thinks I'm involved." "Wilks couldn't deduce a hedgehog in a bathtub," Agatha muttered. "Ignore him." She spotted a faint smear of mud near the door, too pale for Bill's shoes, which currently looked immaculate. It was a tiny detail, but she filed it away. Mysteries often hinged on trivial nonsense. She had proved that enough times. "Sergeant Wong," Wilks barked, "do you confirm you received a call from the victim last night?" Bill stiffened. "I got a message at the station. He didn't name himself." Wilks produced a small tape recorder with theatrical flair. "He did. He left a second message before his death. He said he had information you would want to hear." Agatha stared. How convenient. Too convenient. "May I hear it?" she asked. "No," Wilks said at once. "This is a police matter." "You're speaking to someone who's solved rather a lot of police matters," Agatha replied, "usually after your lot tangle yourselves in red tape." Bill shot her a warning look. She ignored it. Wilks marched off to bully another constable. Agatha turned back to Bill. "This is serious," she said softly. "If someone is framing you, they've done their homework." "I shouldn't have come," Bill murmured. "You don't need to be involved." Agatha almost laughed. "Bill, every time you tell me that, I end up knee-deep in murder. Better to accept my presence than fight fate." He gave a small, reluctant smile. It faded quickly. Villagers had begun gathering outside the building, huddled in excited clusters. As Agatha and Bill stepped out, Doris Simpson rushed over first. "Bill, they say you argued with that awful critic at the WI." Her voice rang with the thrilling misery of gossip. "Oh, Bill dear, you didn't—" "Of course he didn't," Agatha cut in. "Don't be ridiculous." "Well," Doris said, lowering her voice, "he did insult Mrs. Wong's dumplings. That would turn anyone murderous." Agatha fixed her with a stare. "Doris, I've eaten your trifle. If you haven't murdered anyone yet, Bill can survive an insult." Mrs. Bloxby approached more gently, offering Bill a comforting look. "We're all thinking of you, Sergeant. Don't let idle talk trouble you." But the gossip had already begun spreading its warm little tendrils. Carsley excelled at 2 things, baking and rumour. By lunchtime, half the village would have Bill tried, convicted, and serving time in a prison with dreadful food. Agatha lit a cigarette, her first of the day, justified by stress, and exhaled slowly. "We're going to sort this," she said. "But you must tell me everything. No holding back." He nodded, though his eyes drifted toward the ground. "Did you meet him?" she asked. "No," he said. "He asked me to in that message. I refused. I didn't want trouble." "You've got it anyway," Agatha said dryly. She flicked ash aside. "Someone wants you tangled in this. Now let's find out who." Bill glanced at her, the weight of the case already bending his usually steady posture. "Thank you," he murmured. "Oh, don't thank me yet," she said. "Wait until I've yelled at Wilks properly." She returned home later that morning, Hodge greeting her with a disdainful stretch before settling on his cushion. She poured tea, stared at the frost outside, and tried to ignore the creeping sense of dread. Someone had killed Martin Ledden. Someone had made sure Bill looked guilty. And someone, Agatha suspected, thought they were terribly clever. She sipped her tea and frowned. Clever people annoyed her. They always took far too long to be caught. By afternoon, new whispers drifted through Carsley. A fingerprint, a message, an accusation. The tide of suspicion had already begun turning, and it was turning straight toward Bill Wong. A light drizzle hung over Carsley the next morning, the indecisive sort that never fully committed to rain but still ruined one's hair. Agatha regarded it with contempt before deciding it offered the perfect excuse to march straight into Mercester Police Headquarters. She was already irritated, and foul weather suited her mood. The station foyer smelled of floor polish and nervous ambition. Officers hurried about with the purposeful confusion that came from trying not to look idle, while hoping someone else solved the hard cases. Agatha strode in, chin high, coat as dramatic as she could manage in damp conditions. Bill sat on a bench near the reception desk, shoulders slumped. He looked as though someone had drained all the colour from him and replaced it with resignation. When he saw her, he offered a weak smile. "Thanks for coming," he murmured. "You didn't give me much choice," Agatha replied, softening her tone. "What now?" Before Bill could answer, Inspector Wilks emerged from a corridor with the pomp of a man descending the steps of Parliament. His smile was thin and triumphant. "Mrs. Raisin," he said, "I'm afraid you're interfering in official matters again." "And I'm afraid you're still talking," Agatha said. "Shall we both live with our disappointments?" Wilks ignored her and gestured to Bill. "We've uncovered rather troubling evidence." He led them into a stuffy interview room where the blinds were half drawn, giving the illusion of secrecy. On the table lay a file, spread open like a vulture's wings. Wilks tapped the first sheet with relish. "Fingerprints," he announced, "on the wine glass next to Ledden's plate." Bill frowned. "But I wasn't there." "And yet," Wilks said, "your prints were." Agatha leaned forward. "He was at the WI supper until after 10. Surely someone can confirm that." "Dozens of villagers," Wilks conceded, "but that hardly excludes the possibility that he visited later." Agatha bit back a comment about Wilkes's ability to visit reality once in a while. Wilks revealed the second page. "Ledden's calendar. See the name circled for last night?" There it was. Bill Wong, ringed in red ink as though Ledden had been marking the next sacrificial offering. Bill shook his head. "I don't understand. I didn't arrange anything with him." Agatha gestured sharply. "This is absurd. Anyone could have written that. Half the village knew Bill's full name." "Yes," Wilks said, smiling. "But why would they?" Agatha refrained from listing 17 possible reasons, most involving spite, boredom, or a desire to stir trouble. Instead she asked, "What else?" Wilks savoured the moment. "A neighbour saw Bill entering the building last night." Bill's jaw dropped. "That's impossible." Wilks shrugged. "People misremember things, but her certainty was persuasive." Agatha bristled. "Persuasive doesn't mean accurate." "It does in court," Wilks replied. Agatha opened her mouth for an almighty retort, but Bill touched her arm lightly. "Don't," he whispered. Wilks closed the file with a satisfied thud. "Sergeant Wong will remain on restricted duty until further notice. DCI Daviett supports this decision." As if summoned by the mention, DCI Daviett appeared in the doorway. He was a tidy, harried man who wore anxiety like a necktie. He cleared his throat. "Bill," he began, "this is purely procedural. We must preserve public confidence. Optics, you know." Agatha snorted. "Optics. Wonderful. Why not try competence instead?" Daviett winced. "Mrs. Raisin, we do appreciate your enthusiasm, but we must handle this carefully." "Handle it?" Agatha cried. "You're trying to hang him out like a tea towel." Bill stood, tired eyes pleading. "Agatha, let it go." She glared at Wilks once more before storming out, nearly knocking over a filing trolley. Officers scattered like birds ahead of a determined cat. Outside in the grey car park, she lit a cigarette, ignoring the drizzle speckling her coat. Bill followed her out, looking defeated. "They've already decided," he said quietly. "I can see it in their faces." Agatha blew smoke toward the sky. Wilks couldn't decide what socks to wear without checking a manual. Someone is feeding him exactly what they want him to believe. Bill rubbed his temples. I don't know what to do. First, Agatha said, you're coming home with me. You look like you're about to faint, and I refuse to scrape you off the pavement. His eyebrows rose. Agatha, really? She marched him to her car before he could protest, muttering about incompetent police forces and idiotic fingerprint findings. The drive back to Castley was quiet. Frost clung to the hedgerows and the fields stretched out under pale winter light. Agatha's irritation simmered. When they reached her cottage, she ushered Bill inside. Hodge regarded the newcomer with dignified suspicion, then retreated to his favourite armchair and stared at Bill as though assessing guilt. Agatha put the kettle on. Tea, she announced, and no arguing. You'll do as you're told for once. Bill managed a faint smile. Yes, Mrs. Raisin. Don't call me that, she snapped, though not unkindly. Makes me feel ancient. They sat at her small kitchen table, steam rising from their mugs. The cottage felt warmer than usual, as though determined to comfort Bill. Agatha watched him closely. Start from the top, she said. What exactly happened with Ledden? Bill sighed. He called the station around 8:30, left a message asking to meet somewhere private. I ignored it. I didn't want a confrontation. He didn't say why? No, just that it was important. Agatha tapped her fingers against the mug. Someone could have used that call against you. Bill nodded. I suppose. She leaned forward. Your fingerprints. There must be another explanation. They have mine on file, Bill replied. It wouldn't be hard for someone to get them from paperwork. Exactly, Agatha said. Someone planted them. Hodge punctuated the moment by leaping onto the counter with theatrical disdain. Agatha shooed him off, then turned back to Bill. Ledden was writing some kind of exposé, she said. Did he give any hint who it was about? Nothing specific, Bill said, but he's made enemies everywhere, people in Castley included. So he threatened the wrong person, Agatha mused, and now someone wants you blamed. Her mind began ticking through the likely suspects. Village grudges could be as deep as ancient wells. Just then the phone rang. Agatha grabbed it. Agatha, darling, tell me you're alive, came Roy Silver's voice, bright as a theatre curtain. London is buzzing. Apparently your WI event ended with a murder. Positively Shakespearean. Roy, this is serious, Agatha said. I know, sweetie, that's why I'm calling. I heard at the office that Ledden was planning a big takedown piece. Something about a public embarrassment waiting to happen. Agatha narrowed her eyes. Who? No idea, Roy said. But he bragged it would ruin someone's career. Very dramatic, very Ledden. Agatha thanked him and hung up. Well? Bill asked. Roy says Ledden was about to expose someone, a public figure. Could be counsel, could be business, could be anyone with a fragile ego. Bill rubbed his face. That doesn't help me much. It does, Agatha insisted, because it means this isn't random. Someone had motive. He looked exhausted. Agatha softened again. Bill, you know I'll fix this. You don't have to, he murmured. I absolutely have to, Agatha retorted. Imagine letting Wilks win. I'd never sleep again. He laughed weakly. Thank you. They drank the last of their tea. Outside, the drizzle eased, giving way to a thin shard of sunlight over the village roofs. Agatha stood and paced. Right, she said briskly. First step. Who hated Ledden most? He insulted Felicity's baking. He threatened Gerald Pike. He ruined Eloise Trent's career, and half the WI wanted to drown him in stew. Bill stared at her. That's a long list. Yes, Agatha said, which means plenty of suspects, and one of them is framing you. She crossed to the window and watched Castley's quiet green, her expression sharpening like a cat spotting movement in a hedge. Time to dig, she said. Her voice was determined, almost cheerful, though her eyes remained troubled. She had no intention of letting Bill lose his career, not for truth, not for justice, and certainly not for the satisfaction of that pompous windbag Wilks. Hodge padded into the room, stretched and meowed as though offering approval. Agatha exhaled. Fine. We begin at the WI, the nest of every scandal. She grabbed her coat. Bill looked uncertain. Now? Yes, now, she said. Mysteries don't solve themselves. She paused at the door, glancing back at Hodge, who blinked lazily. Wish me luck, she told him. Hodge yawned. Agatha rolled her eyes. Typical. Even my cat doubts me. But her voice held a flicker of warmth, the kind that comes just before battle. She stepped out into the clearing drizzle, ready to fight for Bill, ready to prod Carsley's gossip machine, ready to chase truth down every hedgerow. The village had no idea she was coming. The following morning arrived with a pale autumn sun stretching over Carsley like a polite visitor. Agatha stood at her cottage window, mug in hand, watching the village yawn awake. The crisp light made the Honeystone cottages glow warmly, as if nothing sinister had ever happened within their walls. Typical Cotswold charm, deceptively innocent. Beneath it lay gossip, grudges, and motives simmering like old stew. Agatha set down her mug with determination. If someone in Carsley had reason to hate Martin Ledden, and she suspected several did, she would find out. And she would start with the most efficient investigative tool ever invented, village gossip. Doris Simpson answered the door wearing an apron, rubber gloves, and an expression of someone prepared to defend her honour. "Agatha, I wondered when you'd come poking. I suppose you've heard the news." "The whole region has heard it," Agatha replied, stepping inside. The cottage smelled of lemon polish and righteous indignation. "Doris, what do you know about Ledden's activities at the WI supper?" Doris tutted. "That man, he was snooping about, saying he intended to write a piece about hygiene concerns. Hygiene, as if I'd let a germ set foot in that hall." Agatha raised a brow. "Hygiene issues? What did he mean?" "He said some kitchens weren't up to standard. Mine. Can you believe? I told him my cottage is spotless." Agatha privately recalled seeing Doris sweep crumbs under the sofa with a slipper, but held her tongue. What did he want? "Oh, just background information. Nonsense. He was fishing for gossip." Agatha eyed her. "And did you offer any?" Doris pulled herself up stiffly. "I am not a gossip, Agatha Raisin." Agatha almost choked on her tea. She said nothing. Doris continued, flustered. "Well, perhaps I said Felicity Trammell's kitchen wasn't always tidy, but that was just friendly conversation." "Did Felicity know you said that?" "Heavens, no." Doris's expression darkened, but she knew he was sniffing around. She was furious by the end of the evening. "Interesting," Agatha pressed. "Did Felicity have reason to hate Ledden?" Doris hesitated. "He accused her of cheating in the summer cake competition." "Was she cheating?" "Certainly not," Doris lied with too much enthusiasm. "She just starts early, and sometimes practices repeatedly, and occasionally bakes the night before." Agatha smiled inwardly. Village honesty was always delightfully flexible. "Anything else Ledden did?" Doris looked around as though the curtains might be spying. "He mentioned he'd uncovered something big, something about someone in Carsley, but he didn't say who." "Did he say when it would come out?" "Next month, I think." Doris wrung her gloves. "Agatha, you don't think—" "No," Agatha said gently, "but I do think he made enemies." When she left Doris's cottage, Agatha stepped into the crisp air, mind whirring. Felicity Trammell was a likely suspect, though far too timid to stab a man without fainting halfway through. Still, fear made people reckless. Her next stop was the vicarage, where Mrs. Bloxby welcomed her with a serene smile. "I made fresh scones," she offered, leading Agatha into the warm kitchen. Agatha accepted one gratefully. Mrs. Bloxby's kitchen always smelled of comfort, butter, jam, and the faint scent of lavender from the garden. It eased her nerves in ways she preferred not to examine too closely. "I assume this is about Martin Ledden," Mrs. Bloxby asked gently. "Yes. He had a notebook with missing pages. Something he was writing. Doris said he was threatening people." Mrs. Bloxby poured tea. He often threatened people. He had a habit of offering to revise reviews for money. Quite a few local businesses felt cornered. "So he was blackmailing them?" In a soft, she spread the photos across the table again. This time she examined the background with sharper eyes. A glint caught her attention. Small, metallic, barely visible. She squinted. On the lapel of the tall figure stood a silver pin. A fox. Sleek, coiled, unmistakable. Agatha frowned. She'd seen it before. A memory surfaced. Roy Silver, waving his arms, gossiping about a dining club in London. The Silver Fox Club, a discreet haunt for wealthy food elites, known for extravagant gossip and even more extravagant menus. "So, our mysterious visitor likes posh dinners," Agatha muttered. She dialed Roy at once. "Agatha, darling," came his theatrical sigh. "Miss me already?" "Spare me," she said. "This club, The silver fox. Who belongs to it? Roy paused. Quite a few dramatic personalities, but one you know, Eloise Trent. Agatha stiffened. The chef? The one whose career Ledden destroyed? The very same. Was she in Castley? She denies it, Roy said. Quite firmly. You know how dramatic she gets when cornered. Agatha rubbed her forehead. Eloise Trent was fierce, proud, and entirely capable of storming the countryside for revenge. But would she deal envelopes in Gerald Pike's hedge? She gathered the photographs, tucking them in her handbag. Hodge padded into the room and watched her with slow blinks. Don't look at me like that, Agatha muttered. I'm onto something. Hodge yawned. She sighed. Fine. Don't congratulate me. Outside, the evening sky deepened into indigo. Village windows glowed warmly, unaware of the shadows threading through Castley's tidy lanes. Agatha stepped into the cool air, determination sharpening her stride. Eloise Trent might deny being near Castley, but she had a fox-shaped habit printed right onto her jacket, and Agatha Raisin intended to confront her. The night smelled of smoke from cottage fires, warm bread from Doris's kitchen, and something else beneath it, the faint, unmistakable scent of secrets beginning to unravel. Agatha awoke the next morning feeling like she'd slept inside a crumpled envelope. The night had been restless, filled with flashes of Gerald Pike's trembling confession, that silver fox lapel pin glittering in her mind, and the unsettling sense that someone was playing a far more elaborate game than expected. By the time she reached her kitchen, Hodge was already demanding breakfast in the tone of a furry landlord collecting unpaid rent. She fed him mechanically, her mind fixed on the clue she'd spotted in the photograph. A silver fox. The Silver Fox Club. Eloise Trent. Hodge sniffed his bowl, meowed his approval, and settled beside the heater. Agatha envied his ability to relax. She poured tea, swallowed half of it without tasting a drop, and decided there was only one next step: confront Eloise Trent in person. Charles Fraith arrived early, looking annoyingly well-rested. He lounged against his vintage convertible with the casual grace of a man waiting for someone else to do the difficult parts of life. "Off to London?" he asked. "Yes," Agatha replied, climbing into the passenger seat. "To prod a chef." "Excellent," Charles said, smiling. "I adore watching you prod people." The drive to London unfurled under soft sunshine that gradually turned cold and steely as they approached the city. Buildings rose like indifferent giants. Traffic thickened. Charles swerved through it with aristocratic ease. Eloise Trent's restaurant sat tucked on a quiet street, stylish enough to appear exclusive but not so fashionable as to attract celebrities. Inside, the decor glowed with muted golds and deep greens. A hush lingered, the cultivated kind that suggested diners should behave, or at least pretend to. A maitre d' with a posture like a swordfish approached them. "Do you have a reservation?" "No," Agatha said, pushing past him before he could object. "We're here to see Eloise Trent," Charles murmured in amusement, subtle as always. They found Eloise in the kitchen, surrounded by stainless steel, steam, and the anxious shuffle of sous chefs. She was striking, tall, sharp-featured, dressed in elegant black, and radiating the brittle glamour of someone who had survived too many critics and not enough kindness. Eloise turned as Agatha approached. Her expression tightened. "Mrs. Raisin, I remember you." "Good," Agatha said. "We need to talk." Eloise dismissed her staff with a flick of her hand. When they were alone, she folded her arms. "If this is about Martin Ledden, I've already spoken to the police." "We're not the police," Charles said pleasantly, "which is why this conversation will be far more interesting." Eloise shot him a cold look. "I haven't seen Ledden for months, and if you think I'm sorry he's dead, I'm not." Agatha studied her. Eloise's beauty was polished, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion, the kind that lingered after reputations were ruined. "You use rare film stock," Agatha said. "Quite distinctive. Same brand Ledden used." Eloise glanced away. "Many professionals use it." "And you know Gerald Pike," Agatha added. That got a reaction, a small, swift tightening of Eloise's shoulders. "I've catered events for him. That's hardly intimate." "Yet there are photographs," Agatha said, suggesting someone with a silver fox lapel pin visited Pike recently. Eloise's composure thinned. "You've been digging." "I always dig," Agatha replied, "especially when someone frames a friend." Eloise exhaled sharply and leaned on the counter. For the first time, she looked less glamorous and more human. Fine. Yes. I met Ledden recently. When? Agatha pressed. 3 nights before he died. Her voice softened. He invited me, said he had information that could clear my name, make people take my cooking seriously again. Agatha exchanged a glance with Charles. And did he? No, Eloise said bitterly. He wanted money, more money than I'd ever seen him demand. I refused. He threatened to ruin me further. She swallowed, sharp pain crossing her expression. So I left. Took the train back to London. Charles looked sceptical. Convenient. I have a ticket stub, Eloise snapped. I can prove I left hours before he died. Agatha sensed truth in her voice, but not innocence, but exhaustion. Eloise had reason to hate Ledden, but the timeline crumbled under scrutiny. She might have visited Castley. She might have met Pike, but the murder? Unlikely, unless she was an exceptional liar. Why were you near Gerald's cottage? Agatha asked quietly. Eloise hesitated. I needed leverage. Ledden hinted Pike was hiding something. I thought maybe, if I got information, I could use it. Blackmailing a blackmailer, Charles murmured. Quite the culinary twist. Eloise didn't smile. I'm ashamed, but I didn't kill him. Agatha believed her, reluctantly, and not fully, but enough for now. Eloise's anger was sharp, but not murderous. Her panic felt genuine. Thank you, Agatha said. We'll be in touch. Eloise stared at her. Mrs. Raisin, if someone framed your friend, be careful. People who hate Ledden tend to hate loudly. People who use him hate quietly. Outside the restaurant, Charles lit a cigarette and offered another to Agatha. She took it without comment, a rare emotional moment worth the smoke. Thoughts? He asked. She's hiding something, Agatha said, exhaling. But not murder. Charles nodded. Then someone else visited Pike. Someone wearing a silver fox pin. Someone desperate. Someone who knows police procedure, Agatha added grimly. They drove back to Castley as daylight faded into a cold blue evening. The sky hung low, pressing shadows over fields. The village glowed warmly as they approached. Golden windows, tidy chimneys, the illusion of safety. Bill Wong was waiting outside Agatha's cottage. His posture looked hunched as though carrying invisible weight. He tried to smile as she approached. Agatha, he said softly, I didn't want to bother you. I just didn't want to go home. Her heart tightened. Come inside. He stepped into the living room, where Hodge immediately leapt onto the sofa and stared at him with slow suspicion. Bill sat carefully, almost reverently, as though terrified of disturbing anything. They've suspended me fully, he murmured. All duties, until further notice. Idiots, Agatha snapped. Bill stared at his hands. I keep thinking, what if I did something stupid without realizing it? What if I walked past that building and someone saw me? Bill Wong, Agatha said firmly, do not let them crawl inside your head. You didn't do this. Someone wants you blamed. He nodded, though his eyes glistened with a humiliation that twisted inside Agatha like a knot. Hodge, surprisingly sympathetic, climbed onto the armrest beside him and bumped his head against Bill's sleeve. Bill smiled faintly. He likes me. He tolerates you, Agatha corrected. It's the highest honor he bestows. They sat for a moment in quiet, the soft crackle of the heater, the gentle shifting of Hodge's tail, the weight of unspoken fears. Then the letterbox snapped. Both of them turned. Agatha rose cautiously and retrieved a thick envelope lying on the mat. No return address, no writing, just an unmarked packet. Her stomach dropped. What is it? Bill asked. Agatha opened it carefully. Photographs spilled onto her table. Her breath froze. Bill, unmistakably Bill, entering Ledden's building. Different angles, different shots, clear as daylight. Bill staggered to his feet. Agatha, I never... Quiet, she said sharply, holding up a hand. She examined the photos. The lighting was off, too bright for the reported time, and Bill was wearing shoes he hadn't owned in months. These are fake, she said. Someone staged these. Bill sank into the chair, face drained. Who would do that? Agatha clenched her jaw, because now she knew. Not who the murderer was, but what kind of murderer they were. Someone organized, someone clever, Someone with access to police knowledge and photo manipulation. Someone who wanted Bill destroyed. Someone in their circle. She gathered the photos angrily. "Bill," she said gently, "this confirms something." "What?" "The killer isn't just framing you. They're escalating." A long silence folded over the room. Hodge hopped into Bill's lap, a gesture so rare Agatha almost cried. "We'll catch them," she said, voice low, iron beneath it. "And when we do, I'm buying the champagne." Bill laughed weakly. "I don't drink champagne." "Fine, I'll buy it for myself." She placed the photos into a folder and stood. Tomorrow would be war. Agatha did not sleep well. She paced her cottage half the night, replaying the photographs in her mind. Bill entering Ledden's building, except he hadn't. Different lighting, the wrong shoes, the odd angle. Someone had gone to considerable trouble to create those images. Someone confident, someone organized, someone close. By morning, she was furious enough to march the length of Mercester without stopping. The day opened cold and pale, with low clouds clinging to rooftops like neglected laundry. She reached Mercester Police Headquarters in a mood that could ignite damp twigs. Inside, the foyer buzzed with paperwork, phones, and the faint smell of instant coffee. Agatha pushed past a pair of constables who stepped aside instinctively, as though recognizing the arrival of an impending storm. She didn't knock when she reached Inspector Wilks's office. She flung the door open, the edge banging against the wall with satisfying drama. Wilks looked up from his desk, startled. His expression shifted quickly to irritation. "Mrs. Raisin, I am in the middle of—" "I don't care," Agatha snapped, slamming the envelope of photos onto his desk. "Explain these." Wilks blinked, picked up the photos and shuffled through them. Agatha watched with narrowed eyes, arms folded. "These," he said slowly, "are photographs of Sergeant Wong entering the victim's building." "They're fake," Agatha said. "Even you can see that." Wilks sniffed. "I see no such thing." "The timestamp doesn't match the lighting," Agatha said. "The shadows fall wrong, and Bill is wearing shoes he hasn't owned in months. Check his receipts if you must. He replaced them after stepping in a puddle the size of France." Wilks frowned, then shrugged. "Easy explanations. Memory can be unreliable." Agatha leaned forward. "His shoes? Unreliable? What's next? Gravity?" Wilks ignored her growing rage. "The neighbor confirms she saw him." "The neighbor has the eyesight of a mole in winter," Agatha said, "and you know it." "Mrs. Raisin," Wilks said, voice tightening, "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this is a police investigation. You are not authorized to interfere." "Interfere?" Agatha barked. "Someone is framing one of your own officers and you call my help interference. You should be thanking me for pointing out how absurdly incompetent this all looks." Wilks went red. "Please leave my office." "Not until you look again." "No." Agatha glared fiercely enough to rattle the blinds, then snatched back the photos. "Fine. I'll investigate properly, since no one else is inclined to." She stormed out, ignoring the curious glances of passing officers. Her heels clicked furiously down the corridor, each step a declaration of war. Outside, she stopped in the car park. The cold air soothed her temper slightly. A thin drizzle began, soft but insistent. For once, the rain felt like punctuation rather than mood. She reached into her coat for a cigarette, then paused. She wasn't smoking in front of Bill today. He was fragile enough already. She shoved the packet back into her pocket and marched to her car. On her way back to Carsley, she diverted to the vicarage. Mrs. Bloxby opened the door before Agatha even knocked, as if sensing her approach like a weather change. She wore a soft jumper, flour on her hands, and the calm expression she reserved for wild parishioners and wounded children. "Agatha," she said gently, "come in." Agatha stepped inside, the warmth of the vicarage enveloping her instantly. The smell of freshly baked bread hung in the air, comforting and nostalgic. Mrs. Bloxby ushered her to the kitchen and poured tea. "You look troubled." "Wilks refuses to see reason," Agatha muttered. "He insists those photographs are real." Mrs. Bloxby sat opposite her. "You mustn't let anger cloud your judgment." "I'm not angry," Agatha snapped, then softened. "All right, I'm furious." Mrs. Bloxby smiled faintly. "What do you truly know?" Agatha took a deep breath. The killer needed Ledden silenced. They needed Bill blamed. And they had access to police evidence. Whoever did this knows procedure, knows what Wilks would find convincing. Mrs. Blocksby folded her hands. Then you must look for the person who gains most. Gains? Agatha frowned. Who gains from Bill's ruin? Perhaps someone whose own secrets Ledden discovered, Mrs. Blocksby said quietly, and who fears exposure. Agatha sipped her tea, thinking. Mrs. Blocksby's advice always had that gentle, maddening clarity, like sunlight creeping under curtains to wake you when you wanted sleep. Ledden kept a list, Agatha said, targets for his exposés. Bill was on it. But so was someone else, someone I know, someone from Carsley. Do you trust them? Mrs. Blocksby asked. I thought I did, Agatha admitted. Then you must examine that trust. Agatha stared at her tea. Trust. Not a word she enjoyed. It asked too much and gave too little. Thank you, she said quietly. She left the vicarage with a clearer mind, only to find her path blocked by an agitated Gerald Pike. Mrs. Raisin, he cried, you won't believe it. He wrung his hands dramatically. That Trent woman, Eloise, she's behind it all. I'm sure of it now. Agatha raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Why? Because she threatened me, Pike said. She said if I didn't keep quiet about her visiting, she'd expose. Gerald, Agatha said, cutting him off. You are lying. He froze. Eloise is many things, Agatha said, but she's far too busy to chase you around Carsley issuing threats. You're covering your own tracks. Stop panicking. It's unhelpful. Pike deflated like a punctured balloon. I only meant to help. You meant to protect yourself, Agatha corrected, and you gave me no new information. She left him spluttering on the green. As she walked home, something clicked, something she had been circling for days without seeing clearly. The neighbour who saw Bill entering Ledden's flat. She stopped mid-stride. That neighbour was the same man who used to work in police administration in Mercester, fired for misfiling evidence, if she recalled correctly. Someone with grudges, someone with access, someone who might know how to manipulate photographs, timestamps, and official processes. Daniel Hurst, she whispered. The drizzle finally began to fall properly, pattering against her coat. She barely noticed. The frame around Bill was tightening, and she was finally seeing the shape of the hands pulling the strings. Agatha marched toward her cottage, determination returning in force. A kettle hissed softly as she entered. She must have left it boiling earlier. Hodge looked up from his armchair, blinking sleepily, then stretched with lazy disinterest. We've got them, Agatha told him. Hodge yawned. Fine. I've got them, she corrected. She sat heavily at the table, spreading the photographs out again. The evidence screamed manipulation. Daniel Hurst had lived in Ledden's building for years. He knew the layout. He knew how to create believable lies. And with a little financial encouragement, or blackmail, he could have helped someone frame Bill. You slippery little man, Agatha murmured. You're hiding something. She leaned back in her chair, mind racing. Someone had orchestrated every piece of evidence. Someone had been meticulous. The fingerprints, the calendar entry, the neighbour's testimony. Someone in law enforcement, or someone closely tied to it. Someone who knew Bill's routines, habits, weaknesses. Someone who wanted Bill out of the way. Who benefits? She whispered, echoing Mrs. Blocksby. But the answer hovered just beyond her reach. Hodge padded over and nudged her leg, purring faintly. A surprising gesture. Agatha scratched behind his ears absent-mindedly, grateful for the warm pressure of companionship. The kettle clicked off. The rain intensified against the window. The village dipped into evening shadows. Tomorrow, Agatha said quietly, I'm paying Mr. Hurst a visit. She stood, stretched her stiff shoulders and gathered the photos. A small flame of resolve glowed beneath her usual irritation. Someone had wanted Bill framed neatly. Someone had taken pleasure in twisting the knife. But they had underestimated Agatha Raisin, and that was always their first mistake. Agatha set out for Mercester the next morning, armed with a handbag full of righteous fury and a notebook prepared to record lies. The sky hung low above the Cotswolds, grey and cool, but not raining. One of those undecided mornings where even the weather couldn't commit. She drove briskly, muttering to herself about the idiocy of police investigations and the dangers of trusting neighbours. Hodge had watched her leave with an expression suggesting she'd forgotten something vital, probably him. Daniel Hurst lived in a squat block of flats near Ledden's building. The sort of place where curtains remained closed even in daylight, and every balcony contained at least one sad plant. Agatha climbed the stairs and knocked sharply. The door opened a crack. Daniel Hurst peered out, small, bespectacled, pale, hair thinning at the temples, the sort of man who looked as if he apologized to furniture after bumping it. "Mr. Hurst," Agatha said, "we need to talk." He blinked. "I've already spoken to the police." "Yes, and you've said rather a lot that doesn't add up." He hesitated. Agatha considered shoving her way in, but he stepped aside reluctantly. "All right, but only for a moment." She entered a cramped living room smelling faintly of dust and photocopier toner. A neat desk sat in the corner with stacks of paper, pens lined up like soldiers, and, most importantly, a bulky copier identical to the type Mercester police used 10 years ago. Agatha's eyes narrowed. "Nice machine." "It's just for personal use," Daniel murmured. "Of course it is," Agatha said dryly. "Now, let's discuss your sighting of Sergeant Wong." Daniel licked his lips. "I told the police everything." "And that's the problem," Agatha replied. "You told them details nobody outside the investigation should know, such as the time of death and the position of the body." He froze. Agatha stepped closer. "Care to explain?" Daniel fiddled with his glasses. I heard things." "Heard? From whom?" "Neighbours gossip," he said weakly. "Neighbours don't gossip about body positions," Agatha snapped. "Try again." He swallowed. I might have overheard officers talking in the hall." "Before or after you gave your statement?" Agatha asked sharply. His mouth opened, closed. "After." "Liar," Agatha said, satisfied as he flinched. "You knew these details beforehand, which means someone told you, someone who wanted you to see Bill entering the building." Daniel twisted his hands together. "I only told the truth." "The truth?" Agatha raised an eyebrow. "Interesting, because your timing's also changed. You told the police you saw Bill at 5:30, then you told Wilks you saw him at 6, and now you're saying 6:30. "It was confusing," Daniel whispered. "Not as confusing as your memory," Agatha retorted. She walked to the desk and tapped the copier. "And this, identical to the device that produced the timestamp on the fake photographs delivered to me." Daniel's face blanched. "How would you know that?" "Because I'm not stupid," Agatha said. "Now spill it." "Who paid you?" Daniel backed away, shaking his head. "I can't." "You can, and you will," Agatha said, voice low. "If Bill Wong goes down for murder, I will personally make sure you face justice for perverting the course of it." He stared at her, Adam's apple bobbing. Sweat collected at his temples. Finally, he sagged. "All right. Yes, I was paid." Agatha fought the urge to cheer. "By whom?" But his eyes darted towards the door, fear tightening his features. "I can't say their name." "Why not?" Agatha demanded. "They'll kill me." Agatha paused. Daniel certainly looked cowardly enough to believe that. "Listen, tell me who paid you, and I'll make sure you're protected." "No one can protect me," Daniel whispered. "Not from them." Before Agatha could press him further, he moved with surprising speed, snatched his coat, grabbed a small bag, and bolted for the door. "Oi!" Agatha shouted, sprinting after him. Daniel thundered down the stairs. Agatha followed, puffing, cursing the day she stopped doing morning walks. She burst out onto the street to see him running, badly, toward the bus stop, arms flailing. "Daniel, stop!" He didn't. Agatha charged across the pavement, dodging a cyclist who yelled abuse. Daniel swung into an alley. Agatha followed, heart pounding, trying not to imagine the headline, "Local Sleuth Collapses During Mild Jog." The alley spat them out onto Mercester High Street. Daniel stumbled, recovered, then ran again. Agatha pushed on, fury driving her like a motor. Daniel darted past a bakery, nearly collided with a pensioner, and finally stopped beside a narrow gap between two shops, chest heaving, glasses crooked. Agatha reached him moments later and grabbed his sleeve. "You're not going anywhere." He sagged against the wall, defeated. Tears welled behind his lenses. "I didn't want to do it." "Then why did you?" He looked around, terrified, lowering his voice. They said I owed them, and if I didn't help, they'd tell everyone what I did at the old job." Agatha frowned. "What did you do?" "Took forms, sold some, just copies." He wiped his nose. "I needed money." She sighed. The man was a fool, not a mastermind. Who paid you? Daniel's eyes widened again, and he shook violently. I can't say their name aloud, not here. Please. Agatha tightened her grip. Daniel, this is your last chance. Tell me, or I walk into police headquarters and tell them you falsified evidence. They'll lock you up, and whoever hired you will forget you exist. Daniel trembled, staring at her. His voice cracked. It was... A car honked loudly nearby, making him jump. He swallowed and leaned close, whispering the name into Agatha's ear. Agatha froze, the world tilted. The street noise faded. Are you sure? She asked quietly. Daniel nodded miserably. They said Bill needed to be eliminated, that Ledden knew too much. Agatha stepped back, shocked. Rage simmered beneath her ribs, cold, controlled, deadly. I need you to come with me, she said, but Daniel shook his head violently. No, I've said too much, I have to go. Daniel. He pulled free and ran, not toward the bus stop this time, but toward the side streets of Mercester. Agatha chased him only a few steps before realizing he was gone. He vanished into the maze of buildings like a startled rabbit. Agatha stood in the street, breathing hard. The drizzle finally began, soft and persistent, dripping down her coat. For once, she barely noticed. She had a name now, a real name, someone close, someone trusted, someone who knew Bill's routines and the weaknesses in Mercester police procedure, someone who stood to lose everything if Ledden's expose had been published. She walked slowly back to her car, numb with a mix of triumph and dread. At the cottage, Bill was waiting. He sat on her steps with the posture of a man quietly cracking. Hodge watched through the window, tail flicking irritably. Bill looked up. Agatha, I've been formally notified. His voice shook. They're preparing charges. Agatha felt her stomach plummet. Those idiots. I didn't know where else to go, he whispered. Inside, she said firmly, pushing the door open. Bill followed her to the kitchen. Hodge eyed him, then begrudgingly allowed him to sit. Agatha poured wine, a generous measure, and shoved the glass into Bill's hand. Drink. You look as if you need it. Bill did. His eyes glistened. Agatha, thank you, I don't deserve this. Nonsense, she said gruffly. You deserve far better than this whole circus. He bowed his head. Agatha awkwardly patted his shoulder. Physical comfort was not her speciality, but tonight demanded it. It's not over, she said. In fact, I'm closer than ever. Bill looked up, searching her face. Did you find something? Yes, she said quietly. I found someone. Who? Agatha shook her head. Not yet. I need proof. She watched him struggle to steady his breathing. Hodge, moved by pity, climbed into Bill's lap and curled there, purring. Bill laughed weakly, stroking him. He likes me, Bill said. Don't get ideas, Agatha replied. He still prefers me. Outside, the drizzle softened. Inside, the heater hummed. Bill held the wineglass tightly, eyes distant. Agatha stood by the window, the whispered name echoing in her head. The mastermind was closer than she'd feared, far closer. And when she confronted them, everything in Carsley, and in her own life, would shift. Agatha drove back to Carsley in a state that could only be described as slow-boiling fury. Daniel Hurst's whispered revelation played on a loop in her head, as intrusive as a wasp in a jam jar. Inspector Wilks. Of all the suspects, vain chefs, nervous counsellors, gossiping villagers, she had not expected the killer to be a pompous, rule-obsessed officer of the law. But the moment Daniel said his name, the pieces snapped together with chilling precision. The fake photographs, the planted fingerprints, the refusal to examine inconsistencies, the eagerness to frame Bill, a steady officer, well-liked, trustworthy. Bill, who was everything Wilks was not. Agatha reached her cottage, the sky deepening into bruised blue. She slammed the car door with unnecessary force. Hodge watched through the window, unimpressed by her dramatics. Inside, she found Bill still on the sofa, Hodge in his lap like a reluctant therapist. Bill looked up. Any news? Agatha hesitated. She wanted to spare him. She also wanted to punch Wilks directly in the ego. Instead, she said gently, I have a strong lead. Bill swallowed. Good or bad? Potentially explosive, she said. He nodded, accepting the vagueness. I trust you. The words hit her harder than the drizzle outside. Trust. Something Agatha rarely received without conditions or warnings. She cleared her throat abruptly. Right, enough gloom. "You'll stay here tonight," she declared. "You're in no state to drive, and I don't want you alone." Bill started to protest, but Hodge dug claws lightly into his jeans, as if voting in favor. Agatha fetched spare blankets and placed them near the sofa with more force than necessary. "Get some sleep," she said, softer now. "Tomorrow, I'll fix this." Bill nodded, exhaustion sinking into his shoulders. Hodge curled tighter. Agatha watched them for a moment, a surprising warmth stirring beneath her irritation. She turned off the lights. Tomorrow would be war. Agatha woke early. Pale light spilled across her bedroom, and birds chirped with infuriating optimism. She marched downstairs, brewed strong tea, and arranged her kitchen like a battlefield. Photos, notes, maps, scraps, all laid out with strategic precision. Hodge sat on the table, grooming himself disdainfully on top of a key document. "Move," she told him. He did not. Bill emerged, bleary but clearer than the night before. "Tea?" Agatha offered. "Please." She pushed a mug toward him and pointed at the layout on the table. "We need proof. Ironclad. Foolproof. The kind even Wilks can't wriggle out of." "If it's Wilks," Bill said quietly. Agatha eyed him. "You're too decent. Of course it's Wilks." But she understood his reluctance. No officer wanted to believe a colleague was corrupt, let alone murderous. Agatha softened her tone. "We're not accusing him yet. We're investigating him." Bill nodded, accepting the distinction. Agatha listed what they needed. Financial evidence linking Wilks to Daniel Hurst. Digital evidence. Duplicate timestamp files created on Wilks's office computer. Physical evidence. Ledden's missing notebook pages. "And how do we get all that?" Bill asked. "Legally," Agatha said. "We probably don't." Bill frowned. "But creatively," Agatha continued. "Oh, we absolutely do." Charles arrived an hour later in his convertible, scarf flowing, expression amused. "You rang," he said, stepping inside. "What crime are we committing today?" "The one we need to," Agatha replied. "Wilks is our killer." Charles raised an eyebrow. "Really?" I suppose his moustache always hinted at something sinister. "He doesn't have a moustache," Agatha said. "Exactly." Charles smirked. Bill exhaled. "We need proof." "And we need Daviett," Agatha added. "If we present evidence to him first, he can't ignore it. He hates Wilks anyway, professionally." Charles clapped his hands once. "Then let's assemble what's needed." "Roy will be useful too," Agatha said. "He can dig up financial gossip with frightening speed." Charles paused. "You're building a miniature espionage team." "I'm building common sense," Agatha corrected. Hodge meowed in reluctant agreement. They set to work. Charles took Bill to Mercester HQ. With his aristocratic charm, he breezed into the administrative hallways, chatting up a receptionist until she left her post for a tea break. Bill slipped into Wilks's office with shaking hands. The computer hummed quietly, screen black. "Password," Bill whispered. "Try Wilks 123, Charles murmured. "Too obvious." Then Wilks 1. A beat. The screen lit up. "He deserves prison for the password alone," Charles muttered. Bill navigated the files, clicking through folders. There, a directory of image processing tools. And deeper inside, duplicate timestamp files. Several, all generated around the time Ledden died. Bill's breath caught. "We've got him." "Copy everything," Charles said. Bill loaded them onto a floppy disk and deleted none of the originals. They slipped out unnoticed. Meanwhile, in London, Roy Silver stormed through financial databases like a glittery hurricane. He rang Agatha 4 times. "Darling, it's divine," he crowed. "Money moves like a river, and Wilks is splashing everywhere. Payments to Daniel Hurst over the past 6 months. Several. Quiet. Hidden under the name of a consulting fee." "Brilliant," Agatha said. "Send it all." Back in Carsley, Agatha visited Gerald Pike under the pretense of discussing village budgets. In reality, she rummaged around his gossip until she found what she needed. "Wilks drives a red saloon," Pike said importantly. "Lives in that horrid block near the bypass." Agatha thanked him and set off immediately. She parked near Wilks's home and crept to his car boot. A bent paperclip and a bit of force did the trick. She had spent enough time in London to pick up questionable skills. Inside the boot lay a small metal case. She opened it. Her heart raced. Ledden's missing notebook pages. She snapped photographs, returned everything exactly as found, and shut the boot. The puzzle was complete, and Agatha Raisin planned the final move. The WI hall sat calm and empty when Agatha arrived that evening. The sky outside glowed a fading gold. Inside, gossamer strings of dust drifted gently in the hush. Charles set up a recorder behind the folding screen. Roy fussed over microphone placement. Mrs. Bloxby arranged chairs with serene efficiency. Agatha lit a single candle on the centre table. "We don't want harsh lighting. Makes people defensive." Charles chuckled. "You're frightening." "Good," Agatha said. "I intend to be." Wilks arrived precisely on time, face stiff, posture self-important. "Mrs. Raisin," he said, "you requested a meeting." "Sit down," Agatha replied, voice chilled enough to frost the windows. "We need to discuss Leaden." Wilks eyed her suspiciously, but sat. "You said you had information," he said. "Make it brief." Agatha folded her hands. "I know you were being blackmailed." Wilks flinched. Agatha continued, tone a scalpel. "Leaden discovered you bribed your way into your current rank. He confronted you. You panicked. You killed him." Wilks stiffened. "This is outrageous." "Then," Agatha said, "you framed Bill. You picked the easiest target, the officer too decent to suspect you." "You're delusional," Wilks snapped. "No," Agatha murmured, "just prepared." She slid photographs across the table, timestamp files, the bank transfers, the stolen notebook pages. Wilks paled. For the first time, fear showed through his bluster. This is circumstantial." "Is it?" Agatha asked. "Because we also spoke to Daniel Hurst." Wilks shot to his feet. "That little rat." "He told us everything," Agatha said softly. A long, trembling silence. Wilks sagged into the chair. His voice, when it emerged, sounded small. "He was going to expose me. Everything I worked for, gone." "So you killed him," Agatha said. Wilks's shoulders shook. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I only went to warn him. But he threatened me, said he had files, documents, stories." "So you stabbed him," Agatha finished. Wilks buried his face in his hands. "I didn't mean to kill him. I only wanted control." "Then why frame Bill?" Agatha pressed. Wilks lifted his head. Shame clouded his eyes. He was tidy, reliable, predictable, and he would never suspect me. Agatha felt a sharp twist in her chest. Bill, loyal, decent Bill, betrayed by someone who should have protected him. "You fool," she whispered. At that moment, the back door of the hall burst open. DCI Davitt entered with Bill at his side. Charles emerged from behind the folding screen, holding the tape recorder victoriously. Roy beamed like a man presenting a masterpiece. Mrs. Bloxby stood quietly, hands clasped, sorrow in her eyes. Wilks staggered back. "No." "We heard everything," Davitt said coldly. "Inspector Wilks, you are under arrest." Bill stepped forward, gaze steady but wounded. Wilks opened his mouth, perhaps for apology, perhaps for excuse, but nothing emerged. Davitt cuffed him and led him away. Agatha stared after them, heart thumping with a confusing brew of triumph, fury, and relief. It was over. But the price, she knew, had been too high for Bill. The hall emptied slowly. Roy left first, chattering about celebratory drinks. Charles followed, offering Agatha a wink. Mrs. Bloxby squeezed Agatha's hand before stepping out into the night. Eventually, only Agatha and Bill remained. "Agatha," Bill said quietly, "you saved my life." "Don't be melodramatic," she replied. "I simply exposed an idiot." Bill smiled weakly. "Thank you." Agatha felt heat rise in her cheeks. She waved him off, embarrassed. "Go home. Rest. You've been through hell." Bill hesitated. "Are you all right?" "Me?" Agatha scoffed. "Please, I thrive on chaos." But when Bill left and the hall's silence folded around her, she allowed herself a breath, a long, trembling one. She stepped outside, the night air cool against her skin. Carsley glowed warmly under the street lamps. Peaceful again. Safe. Justice had been done, but she couldn't shake the echo of Wilks's confession, or the memory of Bill's fragile trust. She closed her eyes briefly, then headed home. Hodge greeted her with a disdainful chirp, stretching extravagantly on her armchair. Agatha smiled faintly. Yes, she said softly, stroking his head. "I'm home." The kettle clicked on, filling the cottage with gentle warmth. Somewhere inside her chest, tension eased, slowly, imperfectly, but enough. She lit a single cigarette by the back door, took one reflective drag, and let the night settle around her. Tomorrow would bring new gossip, new scandals, new foolishness. But for tonight, Castley could sleep. And so, finally, could she. Castley woke to a chilly, bright morning, the sort of morning that appeared freshly laundered after days of drizzle. Sunshine slid across the honeystone cottages, warming the frosted lawns and encouraging gossip to begin early. Agatha Raisin opened her curtains, squinting suspiciously at the clear sky. It looked far too hopeful. In her experience, hopeful weather usually meant someone was about to irritate her. Downstairs, Hodge sat like a small, furry monarch waiting for breakfast. She fed him, then brewed tea strong enough to wake the dead, a phrase she winced at given recent events. Bill Wong had been reinstated the evening before. Davitt himself had arrived at Agatha's doorstep, moustache twitched, to inform them that Wilks's confession was the kind of disaster that will take months to clean up. Bill had listened quietly, nodded politely, and then sagged into Agatha's armchair like a man whose spine had been waiting weeks to relax. This morning, Agatha wondered how he was coping. She toyed with the idea of checking on him, but decided she'd rather avoid looking sentimental before breakfast. Instead, she stepped outside to find the village humming with energy. Doris Simpson stood on the green speaking urgently to Mrs. Boggle. They both turned toward Agatha at once. "Morning, Mrs. Raisin," Doris called. "Have you heard? Bill's back on duty. Isn't it marvellous?" "Yes, marvellous," Agatha said, resisting the urge to roll her eyes. Mrs. Boggle waddled closer. "I've baked him a lemon drizzle. Poor lad's been through so much. You should bake him something too." "No," Agatha said flatly. Mrs. Boggle huffed. "Well, it's nice to show support." "I'll show support by not poisoning him," Agatha snapped. Doris pressed a hand to her heart. "Oh, Mrs. Raisin, you're wicked." The pair bustled off, whispering loudly. Agatha watched them go, irritated and secretly touched. She headed to the shop for milk. Along the way, villagers stopped her every few paces. "Brilliant work helping Bill, Agatha." "You're practically a detective yourself." "We were all rooting for him, of course, but you really carried the day." Agatha accepted the praise with a stiff nod, pretending indifference. Inside, however, pride blossomed like a dangerous weed. Bill Wong discovered, to his horror, that Castley had declared him the village's tragic hero of the month. When Agatha stopped by the station to drop off some information for him, she found him standing behind the reception desk buried beneath gifts, knitted scarves, jars of chutney, dubious biscuits, 2 wilted bouquets, a crocheted owl, and what appeared to be a hand-painted pebble with hope written across it. "Kill me," Bill muttered. Agatha smirked. "Castley being nice to you? That's unbearable." Bill gestured helplessly at the mountain of offerings. "I can't breathe in here." Doris brought stew, twice. "I'm sure it'll pass," Agatha said, then added wickedly, "unless they nominate you for Villager of the Year." Bill gave her a haunted look. "That exists?" She grinned. "No, but it should." He tried to glare, but the relief in his eyes softened any attempt at seriousness. "Agatha, thank you again." She waved him off. "Please, I only helped to prevent the police embarrassing themselves further." Bill's smile held more sincerity than amusement. "I know you better than that." Agatha suddenly found herself interested in the framed notice board behind him. She mumbled something incoherent and hurried out before she could accidentally feel anything earnest. Back home, she found a parcel on her doorstep, a delicately wrapped box tied with a black ribbon. Suspicious, she poked it first. Hodge sniffed the ribbon, claws extended in case it attempted treachery. Agatha opened it to discover a dozen immaculate pastries, glossy, layered, dusted with sugar, filled with fragrant creams. A note lay on top. "Thank you for clearing my name and my conscience, Eloise Trent." Agatha stared. Eloise Trent had sent a peace offering, gratitude from a London chef, and pastries. "Well," Agatha murmured, "there's a first time for everything." She took one, bit into it, and let out a tiny, involuntary noise of delight. Hodge, alerted by the sound, stared at her sharply. "No," Agatha said, pulling the box away. "You get supermarket kibble. I get these." She ate 3 more before noon. That afternoon, Carsley's rumour mill began churning in earnest. Gerald Pike, apparently mortified by his close association with Leddon's antics, had resigned from every committee he sat on, all 17 of them. "He claims he's taking time to focus on his garden," Mrs. Bloxby told Agatha during a brief visit, "but I suspect he's simply hiding from embarrassment." "Good," Agatha said. "The man nearly fainted on me while discussing beetroot." Mrs. Bloxby smiled kindly. "Even so, he did help you, in his own nervous way." "He helped by being suspicious," Agatha said. "It's his gift." Mrs. Bloxby shook her head with her usual gentle amusement. "You did well, Agatha. The village won't forget it." Agatha changed the subject immediately. Later that day, Roy Silver called in a flurry of excitement. "Darling, you'll be thrilled. Daniel Hurst is being spared prison thanks to his cooperation. He's getting community service and mandatory therapy. Isn't that charming?" "Charming isn't the word," Agatha replied, "but at least he won't be forging evidence anymore." Roy tittered. "Not unless he wants to go straight back to jail. Honestly, darling, you've reshaped the entire region's gossip supply. You're practically a celebrity." Agatha snorted. "Please, I'm merely competent." "Competent women terrify the mediocre," Roy said in a pleased voice. "I adore it." That evening, Agatha slipped into the Red Lion shortly after sunset. The pub buzzed warmly, smelling of ale, chips, and chatter. Charles Fraith sat at their usual corner table, a glass of wine already waiting for her. "You look tense," he observed. "I'm fine," Agatha replied, taking the wine. "Just tired of villagers behaving like we solved world hunger." "We did stop a murderer," Charles said mildly. "Details," Agatha muttered. Charles raised his glass. "To Wilks's downfall." Agatha clinked hers against his. "Good riddance." They drank. For a rare moment, Agatha felt almost peaceful. Carsley's warmth pressed in around her. The murmur of conversation, the clink of glasses, the flicker of firelight from the hearth. "Bill's doing better?" Charles asked. "He's drowning in baked goods and sympathy." "Ah, a nightmare." "Exactly." Charles studied her. "You care for him?" Agatha glared. "Don't start." "I didn't say romantically," Charles said. "Just care." Agatha shifted uncomfortably. "He deserved better than what happened." Charles nodded. "He did. And you gave him better." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. The wine warmed her chest. She allowed herself a small smile. "Maybe," she said quietly. Later, as Agatha left the pub, she found Bill waiting outside, scarf knitted by Doris wrapped awkwardly around his neck. He looked oddly shy. "Are you heading home?" he asked. "Unless you have a better idea," Agatha replied. Bill hesitated. "I just wanted to thank you properly." She sighed. "Bill, let me say it," he insisted. "I know you brush things off. I know you'd rather pretend none of this affected you. But it did. You fought for me. You challenged Wilks. You risked a lot." Agatha looked away, embarrassed. "I wasn't going to let them ruin you." Bill smiled, a small, soft smile. "I'll never forget it." "Well, don't go getting sentimental," Agatha said briskly. "It's cold." He laughed, a real laugh, light and relieved. "I'll let you go then. See you tomorrow." Yes, she said. "Off with you." Bill walked toward the station, scarf flapping. Agatha watched him, feeling something tight loosen in her chest. She headed home alone. The night sky stretched crisp and cloudless above Carsley, full of stars she rarely noticed while fretting, smoking, or pacing. The cottages glowed gently. A fox darted across the lane. A faint breeze carried the smell of wood smoke. The village looked peaceful, suspiciously peaceful. Agatha felt a curl of amusement. "Well," she muttered, "that won't last." She reached her garden gate. Hodge sat in the window, tail flicking, judging her lateness. She opened the door. "Don't look at me like that," she told him. "I saved the day. Again." Hodge yawned. Agatha shut the door behind her, warmth wrapping around her shoulders. She poured a final cup of tea, sat on the sofa, and allowed the quiet to settle. Carsley, ridiculous, nosy, infuriating Carsley, had survived another brush with chaos, and so had she. Tomorrow, no doubt, some villager would start a scandal over jam competitions or fence heights. But tonight, Agatha rested. Hodge curled at her feet. The cottage hummed softly, and outside the stars shone with smug serenity. Sunlight glimmered across Carsley with the smug brightness of someone showing off after days of drizzle. It slid over the cottages, touched the hedgerows, and finally nudged its way through the curtains of Agatha Raisin's bedroom. She opened one eye, squinting. Sunshine always worried her. It meant people felt cheerful, and cheerful people tended to talk. Far too much. Downstairs, Hodge stretched upon the windowsill like a feline prince. His tail curled, his paws flexed, and he greeted Agatha with the bored dignity of someone who expected breakfast and admiration in equal measure. "Yes, yes," Agatha muttered, shuffling to the kitchen. "I know. You're starving, you always are." Hodge blinked once, slow and imperious, as if confirming that she was at least trainable. Agatha fed him, made her tea, and waited for her brain to arrive. The village lay quiet beyond the window, a post-scandal hush, like a room that had been tidied too quickly. She sipped her tea, surprised by a faint, reluctant sense of peace. It felt odd, almost unnatural. The leaden affair had finally ended. Bill's name cleared, Wilks disgraced, Daniel Hurst properly penitent, Eloise back in London pretending none of it had happened. The newspapers had moved on within hours. Mercester's gossip network, of course, would milk it for another fortnight, but Carsley seemed ready to let it fade. Agatha wasn't. She leaned back in her chair, thinking of Bill's quiet gratitude and the way he had tried, with touching awkwardness, to say thank you without looking foolish. She snorted softly. She had helped him because she couldn't stand injustice, especially when the injustice was inflicted by an idiot like Wilks. But still, there had been something about Bill's humiliation that had scraped at her pride. She hated seeing good people hurt, even if she pretended otherwise. Hodge padded across the table and sat squarely in front of her teacup. She nudged him aside. "Don't look at me like that," she said. "I'm not going soft. I'm simply competent. There's a difference." Hodge returned to the windowsill, appearing unconvinced. Agatha drained the last of her tea, stood, and went to the front door for the Morning Post. When she bent to gather it, something thin and pale slipped out from between the catalogues and utility bills. A single folded note. Her stomach tightened, not with fear exactly, but with the sharp tingle of annoyance. She opened it. "You meddle too much. No signature, no threats, nothing else." Agatha stared at the note, lips thinning. Whoever had written it clearly didn't know her well. If they wanted her to stop meddling, this was the worst possible strategy. Warning Agatha Raisin was like waving a red cape at a bull, particularly a bull with good hair, a quick temper, and no patience. She crumpled the note in her fist. "Honestly," she said aloud, "amateur hour." Still, a small shiver of curiosity curled through her. The case was closed. Wilks was finished. No loose threads. Or, she frowned. Perhaps one or two loose threads remained, frayed and irritating. Perhaps someone connected to Leaden still had secrets they didn't want examined. Or perhaps the village simply couldn't bear a quiet week. Agatha lit a cigarette. Only one, her meaningful character beat of the day. The smoke curled upward, catching the sunlight. Hodge jumped into her lap without invitation, stamping once on her thigh before settling with a huff. She stroked his back absently. "I meddle too much," she murmured. "Well, that's hardly news." A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Agatha frowned. Her visitors rarely knocked gently, most hammered as though expecting her to be deaf or dead. She opened the door to find Mrs. Bloxby holding a plate covered with a gingham cloth. "Good morning," Mrs. Bloxby said warmly. "I baked scones, to celebrate the village's restored peace." Agatha eyed the plate. "Peace never lasts long around here." Mrs. Bloxby laughed softly. "No, perhaps not, but it's lovely to enjoy it while we can." Agatha stepped aside to let her in. "Come on then, tea's made." The vicar's wife entered with her usual serene grace, placing the plate on the table. Hodge sniffed the cloth suspiciously. Mrs. Bloxby stroked his head without hesitation. Hodge accepted the affection with regal restraint. "You look thoughtful," Mrs. Bloxby said, taking a seat. Agatha produced the note. "This was in my letterbox." Mrs. Bloxby read it, eyebrows lifting only slightly. "Well, someone is feeling bold." "Or stupid," Agatha said. "Probably both." "Do you think it concerns the case?" "I think it concerns my existence," Agatha replied. "I upset people simply by breathing." Mrs. Bloxby smiled. "You do have a talent for it." Agatha grunted. "Whoever wrote that note must think I'll back off." "You won't," Mrs. Bloxby said kindly. "Of course not, but the timing irritates me. I solved a murder, cleared Bill's name, exposed a corrupt inspector, And now someone wants to scold me like a naughty schoolgirl. Mrs. Blocksby poured more tea. Perhaps it's not a threat. Perhaps it's insecurity. Insecurity, my foot, Agatha said. This is a warning. Mrs. Blocksby considered this. Even so, it may not be dangerous. Some people fear disruption even when it brings justice. Yes, well, I fear boredom, Agatha said. And this reeks of someone trying to keep me bored. Mrs. Blocksby patted her hand. Take care, Agatha. Agatha folded the note. I always take care. Mrs. Blocksby's expression suggested she disagreed, but knew better than to say so. They drank tea together, the quiet, companionable. Hodge purred loudly on Agatha's lap, perhaps to emphasize he deserved scones. When Mrs. Blocksby finally rose to leave, she said, The village feels lighter today. You should enjoy that. Agatha watched her go. The sunshine warmed the cottage, the kettle hummed softly. Hodge kneaded her leg with blissful indifference. Enjoy peace, Agatha muttered, as if. She looked once more at the note. A smile tugged at her lips. You meddle too much, she repeated. Good, she said. I'd hate to be dull. Outside, Carsley lay bright and peaceful, which, as far as Agatha was concerned, was the surest sign that trouble was on its way.